The four sages of Duarte are some of the most important figures in all of the Star Wars lore. They're the very foundation of the Republic, and because of that, the foundation of democracy in the galaxy itself. They are also the primary role models of Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine. So how is it that these figures, who were inspired to construct a republic that would stand for 1,000 generations, also be the primary inspiration for one Darth Sidious? Well, today, we are going to explain the statues in Lord Palpatine's office, their importance to the Sith Lord, to the Sith religion, and also to the Grand Republic itself. To begin though, we have had a great disturbance in the Force. Many who visit our archives have not yet subscribed, so if you've been enjoying the daily Star Wars Holocron uploads, and have not yet joined our vast order, reach out and crush that subscribe button. It is your destiny. We have foreseen it. The trinkets in Palpatine's office were either dedicated to the Sith or had some sort of dark side connotation. There was hardly anything that he owned which didn't relate to the Sith in some way. Oftentimes with these trinkets, Sidious liked to secretly taunt the Jedi by having them on full display, placed innocently as decorative items in his office. Among these artifacts, constantly seen in the background are several statues depicting four robed individuals. Palpatine was not a man who looked to be frivolous, despite all of his vast wealth. So these statues were not just for looks, nor were they a part of the Chancellor's office prior to Palpatine, but in fact, the four statues depicted beings known as the Four Sages of Duarte. To most in the galaxy, the sages would seem like a natural thing to have in the office of the Chancellor, since they were all extremely important figures during the early days of the Republic, and established its very foundation upon which it was built. However, through the limited knowledge that we have on the sages, there are very dark events that surround them and their origin, having very sinister implications on the Republic and the governing force in the galaxy. In this video, we are going to provide all the information we have available about the Four Sages, and do so in order to discuss who they could have possibly been, and why Palpatine was obsessed with them. Palpatine was an individual who did not look up to very many people at all. Out of everyone, it could be said that Palpatine held the most respect and even admiration of Darth Plagueis. But to some deep degree, even Plagueis was a fool in Palpatine's eyes. Eventually, a fool that needed to be discarded. Despite only maybe Darth Malgus, there was no one in all of the lore to Palpatine that demands such reverence as the sages. The fact that the sages of Duarte are obscure figures in the galaxy is ironic considering their massive importance to the Republic. In the early days of the Republic's establishment, in a year that has never been disclosed, the Four Sages of Duarte were philosophers, as well as lawmakers that eventually rose to power due to their planet's prominence in the Galactic Senate. The sages stemmed from the world known as Nawain, one of the allied worlds of the Republic's core founders, so any of the Nawanese ministers carried heavy prominence in the Galactic Senate. It was for this reason that the Four Sages of Duarte were able to gain so much power so quickly. However, their reign was a controversial one. The political opinions that Duarte had were harsh and radical, and they moved to pass laws that were contentious and known to be coldly unsparing, especially to new species that wished to enter the Republic. Despite this though, the sages had a massive following due to the fact that they seemed to possess arcane wisdom, and their decrees often brought the Republic to new heights of prosperity and grand wealth. Although lore is scarce, we do have the names of the Four Sages, along with which statue belongs to each sage. We'll start with Barata Donlos, who is depicted wearing a helmet and leaning his head on top of a staff. Sometimes, Donlos' statue is depicted wielding a sword. He is one of the most interesting of the sages, as he actually publicly promoted the study of the dark side and wanted the Republic to learn from the dark side of the Force. He is one of the most important sages to our lore, as he is one of the Four Sages that outed the rest of them for being dark side studiers and even active worshippers of the Sith. His statue was given to Palpatine by Plagueis, who seemed to take an affinity for this particular sage. The next two are more obscure though, going by the names of Yanjon Zelmar, who is the statue with a flared hat and seen with his right hand in the sleeve of his robe, and his left hand on top of his right. And then we have Fea Rodimos, who is the one with a pointed hat and standing with her arms crossed, holding her robe together. However, it is Sistros Nevet who is likely the most recognizable and the most important of all of the Four Sages. Sistros is depicted as a slender, hooded, and robed figure with her hands clasped together near to her face. Sistros was accused of pandering to the multitudes only for her own selfish ends. Strangely, Palpatine would have an affinity for Sistros in particular, as she was his favorite. as that was one of the largest of all of the statues, as well as the one that he held his secret lightsaber hidden within. Whenever the Dark Lord ventured off of Coruscant, he would always carry with him a smaller statue of Sistros, and there can even be seen a statue of Sistros topping Mas Amedda's speaker staff. One of the biggest hidden mysteries of the Sages of Duarte is when exactly they lived. Most sources about the Sages simply say that they were in active duty during the early days of the Republic, but no exact date is ever given. However, using context clues, we can loosely triangulate their existence to being at some point during the expansionist period in Star Wars history. This would stand as the earliest period in all of Republic history, taking place between the dates of 25,053 BBY to the year 20,000 BBY. However, we believe that the Sages would have had to exist prior to 23,900 BBY, and existed on the early end of the Republic. The reason we say this is the exact year the Republic negotiated with the Jedi Order to join them, with the Jedi becoming the Watchmen of the Republic and their Grand Protectors. The reason we believe this is there is no way the Jedi would have stood by if there were representatives of the dark side and Sith zealots in the Senate, promoting the study of such material to the innocence of the galaxy, which the Sages were famous for, wanting every normal citizen to know of and even worship the Sith Order. The Sages existed in a period of time where the dark side had not yet been vilified, and the only taste of the dark side that the Republic had gotten was the Legions of Leto, with the group being a splinter from the Jedi Order during the First Great Schism. However, this war occurred completely separate from the Republic, so very few knew of what a Jedi or a Dark Jedi even was. But what made this even more strange is why the Sith seemed to worship the Force Sages in return, despite the Sages themselves not being Sith at all, which is stated, and even predating the Sith Order as we know it. The Four Sages existed roughly 17,000 years before the Second Great Schism, though something that we know for a fact is that the very bronzenium statues that the Sages had in Palpatine's office were created during a time when the Sith largely dominated and controlled the galaxy. Again, the timetables of this event are currently unknown as in canon. However, there was a time unnamed when the Sith had vast control over the Republic before the Jedi eventually defeated them. In Legends, however, this does not exist, and the Sith do not completely rule the galaxy until Darth Sidious. But there does exist some unknown ancient era in time when the Sith did rule the galaxy in canon, and the Four Sages were inspired by such a rule. In return, the Sith were obsessed with the Sages. They had created the effigies in the first place, and Palpatine apparently undertook the mission of collecting all of them, beginning with Brata given him by his own master Plagueis, and having a preferred one of his own in Sistros. Palpatine had 4 larger ones in the hallway of his office, 2 Brata and Sistros flanking the door of his inner chambers, and then he had 4 smaller statues resting upon his desk. He was definitely a fan. But the thing that we wanted to highlight is the most interesting aspect of this all, and is a little bit messed up. It was the fact that apparently the dark side teachings which created a political environment conducive of prosperity and growth, and that the early Republic was built upon the teachings of the Sages and the Sith. While they were controversial, the Sages of Duarte were by no means reviled by the Republic, but instead were appreciated and respected. And even tens of thousands of years of the Jedi condemning the dark side could not stop their legend. The Republic history remembers the dark side practicing Sages with fondness and appreciation. This has to mean that the Sages were responsible for the powerful and rapid growth seen by the Republic during the expansionist era. Their decrees were harsh, and they were known for using the masses for selfish gain. Everything about them was controversial. Yet, they did better for the Republic as a whole during their lifetime than almost any Supreme Chancellor would. It is also amazing that the Sith seem to adamantly worship the Sages, despite them being a keystone of a democratic society. The Sages are shrouded in mystery, and we may very well never find out just exactly how important they were to both the Sith and the Republic, holding that secret link between ruthless strength and prosperous growth in all political spheres. But that, my friends, is the grand mystery of the Four Sages. What are your thoughts on these controversial figures of the galaxy, and their extreme importance to the Republic and the Sith? But as always, my friends, thank you for visiting, and may the Force be with you.